Hello, in this video I'm going to be sharing with you how to cut an asymmetric waist snatch Victorian corset. So if this is something you like, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up. So let's dive right into today's video. So I've gone ahead to mark out all my basic measurements, which includes my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to waistline, and for the top length I went ahead to add about 5 inches to it. So the next step you want to take is to go ahead to mark your shoulder divided by 2, and you're going to go down by 1 inch. This is to mark your shoulder slope. So I'll go ahead and place my ruler and I will draw my shoulder slope at this part of my pattern. Next step is to mark my chest line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So here I have 7 inches and I'm going to mark. So whatever I have on the shoulder, which is my shoulder divided by 2, I'm going to mark it at that point. This is to make sure that I have a straight line, and I'll place my ruler and I will connect drawing a line. So now I'm going to measure what I have from my chest line down to my bust point, and what I have there is 1 inch, and I'll go ahead to mark this all the way on top of my bust line. So after I'm done marking this, I'm just going to go ahead to use a ruler and I will draw a straight line. So the next step from there is to mark my bust span divided by 2, which is also your nipple to nipple divided by 2. So my nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5. I'm going to mark it all the way down to the lower part of my pattern. And after I'm done marking, I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to draw connecting a straight line starting from the chest line down to the top length. Now you're going to mark your dart intake. And for my dart intake, I'll be marking 1 inch on both sides. So if you're plus size or you have a bigger bust, you're going to be using 1.5 inches to contour this part. So I'm just going to place my ruler and I'm going to draw connecting those parts, and I'll extend my dart at the lower part this way. So after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to go ahead to place my curved rule, and I'll connect from the bust down to the under bust and repeat the same process on this part. So after I'm done doing that, I'll just gently go ahead to use my marker to rule out the dart lines so that it's going to be very visible for you to see. So the next step is to go ahead and mark the upper part of your pattern. So I'll be marking 2 inches from my chest line. Now I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to draw a fence line at that point. So next, you're going to also mark your nipple to nipple divided by 2, and you're going to extend it down to the bust line. So go ahead and mark your dart intake of 1 inch at both sides. So I'm just going to connect it down to the bust line. But after, I went ahead to reduce the dart lines also when I was drawing out the upper part of this pattern. So this is it. Instead of using 1 inch, I went ahead to use 0.75 inches because of the upper part of my dress, so that when I'm joining it, actually there won't be too much curve at that point. So after I'm done connecting this way, the next step is to go ahead to mark my body circumference. But before I mark my body circumference, I'm going to divide the armhole into 2. So I was supposed to do that actually and I forgot. So I came out by ½ inch and I'll be marking my bust circumference divided by 4. Now I'll place my ruler connecting the ½ inch down to my bust circumference and to the upper part of my shoulder this way. Now after I'm done doing this, I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker to connect, drawing out a curve at that point. So now I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4, giving me 8.3. Measure the dart intake I have here marked, and I'll add my sewing allowance. Going down to my under bust, I'll mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, which is 28 divided by 4. I have 7. Measure the dart intake, replace, and I'll add my sewing allowance. On the waistline, I'll be marking out my original waistline before we go ahead to snatch it, which is also the same as my under bust of 28 inches divided by 4. I'll mark the dart intake and I'll replace and also add my sewing allowance. So at the at the top length, I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4 and add the sewing allowance. So when you're making this pattern, 1/2 inch or 1 inch is okay for this. You don't need so much allowance. And I'll go ahead to place my curved rule. I'll connect from the bust down to the under bust, down to the waistline, and to the top length. So after I'm done connecting, I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker to mark this out. And the next step we're going to take is to go ahead and work on the upper part of this pattern. So for this pattern, to mark out the neckline, I'll just start marking from this point, take like a little pinch from there, and I'll extend. So while getting close to the bust, I'll just go in a little, and I'm going to connect it to my first dart intake this way, and I'll extend it up. So you notice that there's like a little curve on that point, and I'll just go up, and then at the shoulder point I'll come down by 1 inch. So this is what I have on this point, and I'll connect the armhole. And whenever I'm drawing out my pattern, I like to have about 1/2 inch upwards, especially to avoid making my armhole too visible. So I'll mark that 0.75 for the dart, and I will readjust my dart, that is 0.75 inches, and I'll go ahead to connect this all the way to this point and blend it up. So this is what I have, and now we're going to go ahead to mark out the rest of the dart of this pattern. You want to go ahead and create little indication for the eyelet in front of this pattern. So this is what I have at this point. So next we'll be moving over to create the dart lines and also snatch our waist for this pattern. So now we want to reduce our waist to 24 inches, and to do that we're going to do 28 minus 24. So what you're going to have is about 4 inches. So that 4 inches, if you divide it by 4 again, what you're going to have is 1 inch. So that 1 inch, now you'll be sharing it half on both sides to mark your darts. And before doing that, I'll just go ahead to mark about 1.5 inches on this point, and I'm going to rule a straight line before attaching or marking out the dart on the waistline. So there are other methods of snatching your waist, and this is also easy to use. So I'm just going to go ahead to connect the style lines down first before I'll go ahead to create my darts. So just like I said earlier, I'll be marking half inch on both sides. That means 1/2 inch on both sides will give me 1 inch. So by the time you mark 1 inch on the right side of your pattern, 1 inch on the left side of your front pattern, and then repeat this also at your back pattern. That is, you'll be having 2 inches dart intake taken away from the front waistline and 2 inches dart intake taken away from the back waistline. So 2 plus 2 will be giving you 4 inches. So if you take out that 4 inches, your waistline will reduce to 24. So I'll just go ahead and blend in, and now we are going to also create another style line to this pattern also. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark to the end. So after I'm done doing this, I will label, and we'll go ahead to readjust the waistline. So here we have like a busk, and whenever you're drawing out a dart where you have a dart intake or dart line, go ahead and draw it straight. So from this point I'll go up by 1.5, and from here I'm just going to connect it all the way down. So this is what I have on this point, and I'm just going to go ahead to cut this out. So at this point, if you haven't yet subscribed, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and also leave your comment at the comment section. If you have any question, go ahead and also leave it there. So after I was done cutting my pattern, this is what I have, and this is what it's looking like. So next we'll move over to the back pattern, where I've gone ahead to mark out all the basic measurements. And now the next step is to go ahead to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. So I'll be marking my nipple to nipple divided by 2, which is 3.5 inches, just like we did for the front pattern. So after marking that, I'll just go ahead to place my ruler, and I'm going to connect, drawing a straight line at those points. So now I'll be marking the dart intake after I'm done marking the lines, just like we did for the front. So for this pattern at the back, I'll be using 1/2 inch, and I'll connect upwards this way. Go ahead to do the same at the other side and connect my dart for the lower part. So after I was done marking, the next step is to go ahead to insert my body measurement. Mark your bust circumference divided by 4 and add your sewing allowance. At the underbust, mark your underbust circumference, measure the dart intake, and also add your sewing allowance. At the waist, mark your original waistline divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace, and you're going to be adding your sewing allowance. So after that, we'll be snatching the waist just like we did for the front pattern. Now go ahead to mark your hip circumference divided by 4 and add your sewing allowance. Just like I said, you just need 1/2 or 1 inch for this pattern. So I'm just going to go ahead to connect this all the way from the bust down to the under bust to the waist and down to the hip point or top length. So after this, I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker to mark this out so that it's going to be very visible for me to see. So after I'm done marking this, the next step I'm going to take is to come up by 1/2 inch at the armhole, because we did that for the front pattern, and here I'll come down by 1/2 inch. This is to avoid my pattern from popping up at the back. And now I'll be marking 1.5 inches here, which will be serving as the lacing bar area. This 1.5 inches is not a constant. Go ahead to use whatever that suits you better. So I'm just going to connect, drawing a straight line at that point. So after I'm done marking this out, I'll just make a dot indicating the lacing bar area, and now I'll be coming up by 2 inches here, and I'll go ahead and mark that same 1.5 inches we marked for the front, and I'll just draw out the back waistline this way, or the lower part of the back. Now I'll go ahead and draw out another style line. This will help me snatch out my waistline, and I'm going to connect. So after I'm done connecting, that intake of 1 inch we marked at the front, that is 1/2 on both sides, I'm going to go ahead to repeat it. So by the time you take out 1/2 inch on one side, you'll be having 1 inch, and also repeat it on the other side, so you successfully take out 2 inches for the back. So I'll just go ahead to cut out my pattern, and with this I'm done drafting the back pattern. It's just a basic back pattern. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. If you find this very interesting and educative, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and also leave your comment at the comment section. So in case you don't know, I have another YouTube channel where I do both drafting and sewing tutorials. That is Maki's Closet. You can go ahead and check it out. Thanks.